Hey guys, I'm Think Tank. If you're a returning viewer and have seen my A Unity Devlog Godot series, you might be a little curious about why I've named this video Sewer Sweep Devlog 1, since I was already working on this game in that series. Well, I started A Unity Devlog Godot, unsure if I would actually stick with Godot or even finish my game. Now, I did say in a later episode that I wanted to actually make it a real game, but basically immediately regretted that decision because the project was just not well designed from the beginning, so I didn't even know how to fix it. Since resuming development earlier this year though, I spent a lot of time learning about best, or at least better practices, design patterns, and software design in general, which has helped me a lot in Godot as well as with some of my other projects. I've also been learning more about Godot and its features in general, and since starting to put all these to use, I've ended up basically rewriting or refactoring most of the project into what I feel is a much better base for building the game I want Sewer Sweep to become. And that's its name, by the way, in case you didn't know. Because you're like cleaning out the sewers and sweeping and yeah, you get the idea. So between the fact that I'm feeling more comfortable with Godot and am confident in my ability to actually finish the game now, mostly, I decided to make a dedicated devlog series just for Sewer Sweep and drop the old series, since it doesn't really communicate what I'm doing or where I am anymore with Godot. My marketing team says this will help me get a lot of views, but if it doesn't, I'm going to digitize them and use their souls for better AI behavior, because you just can't get good help nowadays. Okay, now that I've explained the new series, let me reintroduce you all to Sewer Sweep and everything that I got done. Sewer Sweep is the pest control based, unholy combination of games like, get ready for this is going to be hard for me to say, Nuclear Throne, Enter the Gungeon, and Spelunky, with a little bit of Nightmare Reaper thrown in for good measure if you've ever played it. You run a pest control company with your brother, and the city you live in has a real problem with pests in the sewer system, so they've hired you to take care of the problem. The only problem for you is that your business was actually an elaborate prank, and you have nothing but a broom and an old truck to get the job done. You'll just have to find the rest as you go. Pick your contract, your gear, and do your best to rid your beloved city of its pesky problem. Hopefully, it's just a bunch of bugs and rats down there, and nothing more serious like bigger bugs, large reptiles, clowns, living slimes, alien automata, the undead, frogs, or a vast cult bent on taking over control of the local municipal government. Each level, though potentially having the same layout, is slightly different every time you visit. The sewers are a strange place, and not every door leads to the same place it did before, and not every room looks the same each time. Legend has it that the man who designed the sewer system was a wizard and practiced his magic on the tunnels, but it's more likely that there's just a gas leak. The enemies you'll encounter are random each run, and each section has a dominant enemy type that will be the one you face in the nest at the final level. You can make the nest fight easier by clearing out every enemy in the levels leading up to the final level, which will decrease the number of additional enemies that can spawn during the final fight and increase the amount of money you get for completing a job. Weapons you find in the level can be saved by taking them to the end of the section or finding a pneumatic tube that lets you sacrifice the weapon to add it to your collection to ensure it will be available for next time. Any weapons you find have the ability to roll with unique modifiers and rarity that increases the maximum number of modifiers they can have, the base damage, and the durability of the weapon. Okay, now that you know what the game is going to be, let's get into what I've done so far since my last time working on it. Originally, the project was created with Godot 4.1, which is over 2 years old at this point, and is missing some very nice features that have been added since that I wanted to get my hands on. I decided to ignore the suggestion to incrementally update the project to each major version between the one you're on and the one you want, which isn't exactly wise, but it worked out for me. This time. Sometimes you just gotta live life on the edge like that. Really make yourself feel alive. I also finally reorganized the project. Somewhere along the line, Godot got better at doing that, so I found an article on good project organization for Godot projects and followed it. It's mostly done. I still need to find a place for the audio and organize my scripts a little better, but the project is in a much more organized state than it used to be. Okay, I know that was boring, sorry, but it allows me to work more easily and have access to new features that I really wanted, so it was a necessary detour. Game development isn't always about the fun stuff like building levels or designing new enemies, and if you want to enjoy your time making the game, then you need to make sure you get the boring stuff nailed down. With that out of the way, I could finally get into the stuff I really wanted to do, which resulted in me banging my head against the wall for about a week trying to figure out resources and why everyone says they're so great. If you're like me and struggle to get your head around the idea of resources for hours and hours and hours and an embarrassingly large amount of hours beyond that, you can think of them as just a way to define an object based on what data it needs. That's it. You can set up a bunch of non-node inherited types, that's important, and functions to describe an object, and anything that has a reference to it can use whatever relevant information is on the resource however it needs. That simplicity, though, is exactly what makes it so powerful and simultaneously difficult for me to grasp. I kept thinking there was more to them and that I wasn't getting it. So let that be a warning about overthinking concepts. Sometimes they really are that simple. If you design a template for what defines, let's say a weapon, for no particular reason, you can then create instances of those resources on disk and store them in arrays or attach them to inventories or anything else you can think of, and that weapon exists as a concept to the program that can be used however you want. The first resources I created were the item and weapon resources. I'll avoid going into too much detail about how they work because I want to focus on showing them off. I do want to make a video explaining exactly how they work though, and if you're interested in doing something similar and want me to show you, let me know. Basically though, the new design for items and weapons looks like this. I have the base item class and a weapon subclass. Items are the base for anything that can be held by an entity, so that means stuff like keys, healing or repair items, or anything else I can think of. Weapons extend that a little bit with everything needed for a weapon, like damage type, min and max damage, and combo information. I was able to easily add lots of fields for things that haven't even been implemented yet too, like item description, use effects, and the aforementioned damage types. Because I'm not implementing that functionality here, I'm just creating a place for components to look for that data later. I was able to immediately put them to use too by recreating all my original weapons and some new ones, including but not limited to fists, which are the default weapon and not that powerful, a knife that occasionally inflicts bleeding, a pitchfork which, in addition to usually causing bleeding, also knocks back enemies, a big wrench that stuns enemies and of course knocks them back, and finally I made a bat, which does a ton of knockback and really stuns enemies. I'll admit it's basically just a wrench. I was really just playing around when I made it, but it's fun to use. I want to make a version of it with spikes or barbed wire that also does bleed damage as a rare weapon, so having a basic version lays the groundwork for that. Most of the weapons are also kind of heavy, so I make the user move forward when they attack with them. The fists, wrench, and the bat all require stepping into the attack, so backtracking while using them is awkward, but the knife and pitchfork don't, so they're good for kiting enemies or getting in and out quickly. Some of them have combos too. If a weapon has one, then the last hit in that combo will do max damage. Obviously, I have ideas for more weapons, and there are still some things I need to work out, but I like what I've been able to do with it already, and I have the option to easily make lots of unique weapons, so I'm pretty excited to see what I can do. If you have any cool ideas for weapons, leave a comment and maybe I'll add it to the game. Okay, now for status effects. I mentioned them a couple times earlier and they're a big part of the design of weapons, so I'll explain how they work. I took initial inspiration from this video here on how to make status effects, but quickly realized it wasn't fully featured enough for what I wanted. So I took the basic idea of the system but gutted it and redesigned everything else. Each status effect has an effect type, which can be positive like healing or negative like bleeding. The effect can be on tick, which is activated at a set interval, or a constant effect that's applied every update, in the physics step by the way. Once a status effect's duration is up, it handles how to remove itself just like how a state machine state does. So far, I have stun, which interrupts any movement or other actions an entity can take, bleeding, which removes some health every tick, and knockback, which adds a force in the opposite direction of the attacker. I also have some ideas for future effect types. I want to do something different with statuses than most games do, which is usually that every negative effect just causes damage over time. Whether it's burning, poison, sickness, or bleeding, they usually just remove health over time while they're applied. This leads to everything feeling kind of similar and makes resistances to them very important, but I want to have them be more nuanced. So for example, I'm thinking of having fire damage increase the amount of damage you take, but speed you up. If you're chilled, you'll slow down, but also take less damage because your tissue is becoming denser as it contracts. Similarly, sickness lowers your total health and slows you down, since you have less energy and capacity to resist damage when you're sick. Poison will give you random damage spikes instead of consistent damage like bleeding. Finally, bleeding will also lower your attack. Now, some of these status effects are almost like buffs with drawbacks, and others are just more interesting, I think anyway. I'm not sure how to implement all of these features yet because certain things like lowering damage and attack speed aren't easily accessed by the status effects, but I want to see if I can figure it out. Let me know what you think about my ideas for status effects, and if you have cool ideas yourself, I'd love to try and add them. Hopefully that all seems pretty straightforward and fairly simple. Obviously it wasn't so straightforward to design and there's a lot more to the system, but you get the idea. Now that I had the weapons redesigned and implemented, I made some changes to my inventory system to use the resources, and instead of disabling weapons I'm not using, I just destroy them and instance new ones. I made sure that when I create a new instance of a weapon for the first time, it creates a local version of the resource it's based on, so I can update things like its condition without affecting any other instances of it. I also added the ability to have a default item when you have an empty inventory, so you'll always have at least something to fight with. When items are dropped, a generic template is instanced with a reference to the weapon resource and it displays a sprite. It'll also eventually show other information like condition. Finally, I made a loot box that drops a random weapon when you destroy it. It's missing a real loot table since I haven't implemented those yet, but it'll have it eventually. Once that was done, I needed a way to pick up items again. But I didn't like how I was doing it before, which was to have the item you were standing on put itself into the inventory. What I ended up doing was creating a volume that detects items, and when you hit the appropriate button, will pick up the first one in its list and add it to the inventory. It's simple, modular, and keeps the items from having control over what should be managing them. I took the idea of the inventory pickup volume and made an interaction volume that tracks the mouse out to a reasonable distance so you can't open doors across the map. I'd been thinking about adding buttons or switches that can be interacted with, and since I had a test level I was using, I figured I'd try it out there first. So I made a button that lets me spawn an enemy whenever I want. You might have noticed that the interactable objects get outlined when you mouse over them, and that's something I really wanted, so I dipped my toe, ever so gently, in Godot's custom shaders by finding a very nice shader someone else had made. They actually have a bunch of shaders on the website, so if you want something for your own game, you can see if someone already wrote it and save yourself some time. I also made doors behave the same way, but the outline doesn't work right now because the sprite fills its whole texture, so I'll have to make some adjustments for that to work. Then I took the work van, which was originally just a sprite in the level, and turned it into a button that you can use to start a run, just as sort of a proof of concept of what I can do with the buttons, before I moved on to other things.
Well, that didn't work.
Finally, I'll briefly mention that I had to do a ton of rewriting and redesigning of how entities work to accommodate all the stuff I mentioned before. It's not necessary to go into detail about them, but I combined as much as I could into the entity class and only kept the stuff that's absolutely necessary in the player and creature subclasses. Creatures need to control their movement using their context map and state machine, and the player needs to be controllable by the input device, so those are the only things left in their respective subclasses. I also made use of global groups to flag enemies for both AI targeting and keeping weapons from damaging friendly creatures. I want enemies to be able to fight each other like in Doom, so it's important to define what kind of creature they are. Just in case you don't know, groups work similarly to tags in Unity, but you can have scenes be in multiple groups and they can be global or local to the specific scene, so I kind of like these more. That's pretty much it. I do have like over 15 hours of footage of me working on this, but if I went into detail about everything I did, I'd never get this episode out, and it would be too boring. I do want to make some videos about how to use resources to design an item system and how to design status effects as well though, so I'll save the technical stuff for those videos if you guys are interested. You can comment to let me know. I know I redid a bunch of stuff I just addressed in my last video, but like I said at the beginning, I basically started all over, which is why I wanted to make a dedicated series for developing Sewer Sweep, because I'm not just trying out Godot anymore. I actually want to finish this game and I've gotten pretty excited about it, so I hope you'll excuse any awkwardness in the transition. I hope you liked the video. I wanted to make it more of a showcase and less of a boring technical explanation. I have a bad tendency to over-explain and go into too much detail, so I'm trying to keep things more light and fun. Speaking of fun, I had lots of it while doing this, and I hope that shows. I can't wait to get back to work on the project, so stay tuned to my Instagram and Twitter account, and of course my YouTube channel, for more updates on what I'm working on. You can also join my Discord, linked in the description, if you want to easily chat with me and hopefully other people who like to make games. That's it for now. Please like and comment on the video if you did, subscribe if you want more, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!